On Mount Olympus, a young deity paraded herself. She was the goddess of spring, and her youthful beauty enchanted the male deities. Her name was Cora, but she would become better known as Persephone. Demeter, her mother, was overprotective and shielded the young girl from the Olympic gods. She wanted her daughter to maintain her purity and virginity, as did the goddesses Athena, Artemis, and Hestia. So the goddess of agriculture kept Aphrodite and her son Eros away from her daughter. The divinities of love did not want to have another divinity in Olympus immune to their influence, and planned a way to attack the young goddess. Far from Olympus, in the depths of the earth, there was another god who lived free from the influence of the gods of love. His name was Hades, the lord of the Underworld. The endless tasks of managing his kingdom allowed Hades to think of nothing else but his work. But a great tremor disturbed the kingdom of Hades, which rose to the surface to see what was happening. The Etna volcano was erupting, a sign that Typhon, the monster imprisoned by Zeus, was especially unhappy. That's when the god heard a sweet voice coming from a nearby forest. In the woods, Persephone sang without realizing that anyone was watching her. Aphrodite and Eros noticed Hades' interest in Persephone and wanted to take the opportunity. The god of passion and love fulminated the heart of the god with one of his golden arrows, which instilled desire and passion in the hearts of men and gods. Consumed by passion, Hades approached the spring goddess, who did not feel his approach. Hades tried to flirt with the young woman, but she resisted. Impetuously, Hades grabbed his beloved, and the earth opened so that he could return to his domain. With the goddess in his arms, the god of the dead descended through a tunnel into his kingdom. Persephone was very agitated and was locked in a room of Hades' palace until she became calmer. Hades declared his love for Persephone, who, although she felt attracted by the god, was still trying to push him away. Demeter started to get distressed because she didn't know where her daughter was, so she wandered the world in search of Persephone. After much searching, she found one of the nymphs who used to accompany her daughter. She told her how Hades kidnapped the girl, taking her to the underworld when the earth opened. Demeter was furious and would not forgive Gaia, the goddess of the earth, who had been an accomplice to her daughter's abduction when she opened up. As goddess of agriculture, Demeter was responsible for soil fertility. To punish Gaia, she decided to make the land infertile. The goddess cried because she missed her daughter, and, due to the great sadness she felt, she started to neglect her tasks. Zeus started to worry about the situation of the planet, because if Demeter didn't perform her tasks again, chaos would take over the world. The great god tried to convince Demeter to return to her tasks, but she said that the world would remain infertile until she had her daughter back. Zeus assured that Persephone would be freed from the underworld unless she had fed on some fruit from the underworld. At Zeus's request, Hermes guided Demeter to the underworld. After all, he was the conductor of souls, knowing the intricate ways that lead to the kingdom of Hades. The goddess met her daughter at the very moment she was eating pomegranate seeds offered by the lord of the underworld. After eating the fruit, Persephone metamorphosed and became the queen of the underworld. Demeter rebuked her daughter for agreeing to eat the food offered by such an evil being. Persephone said that her husband was not so bad. He treated her with respect and genuinely loved her. On top of everything else, there she would be a true queen. Demeter's heart felt an intense pain, and she started crying. Moved by his mother-in-law's sadness, Hades proposed a deal. Persephone would spend part of the year in the underworld, and the other part with his mother on the surface. Once the deal was sealed, Persephone returned to the surface with her mother. In the ground, which was infertile, many flowers sprouted. The harvests were chock full again. But the meeting period between Persephone and Demeter ran out, and the young goddess returned to the underworld to see her husband again. Demeter was desolate to see her daughter leave, and, depressed, she neglected her tasks again. But when mother and daughter met again, the world flourished once more, and so the seasons were born. Adonis was a beautiful young hunter. While wandering the woods in search of his prey, the young man was worshipped by the flower nymphs. His beauty was so striking that he looked like a god. One day, Adonis's beauty even drew Aphrodite's attention. The goddess of beauty and love, who was playing in the forest with her son Eros, sharpening his arrows. The goddess was delighted with the young man and began to praise him to her son. Eros grew angry due to jealousy and turned his back on his mother while continuing to sharpen his golden arrows. Aphrodite said that Eros should not be jealous as to her. He would always be the most beautiful. She hugged him to comfort him, but accidentally ended up injuring herself on the arrow that Eros was holding. And so Aphrodite fell in love with Adonis. The goddess was spying the beautiful young man, and she could not resist his charms and succumbed to passion. Aphrodite asked the young man who he was, since his beauty was so wonderful that he resembled a god. Adonis knew that this lovely woman could only be Aphrodite, the goddess of love. He said that he was not a god, but a mere mortal. Aphrodite was intrigued because she didn't know that a man could be almost as perfect as a god. Aphrodite drew closer with such a seductive look that no god, much less a mortal, could resist. The couple kissed and began to see each other regularly. These were days of passionate love. On a spring day, Persephone, the queen of the Underworld, was wandering through the woods and stumbled upon the loving couple. She was delighted with what she saw. But she did not know that Eros, the god of love, was ready to pull another one of his pranks. He shot her with one of his arrows. The queen was now also in love with the boy, and decided that Aphrodite should enjoy it while she could, because one day the beautiful boy would be hers. Aphrodite was overzealous of Adonis, fearing that the young and daring hunter would injure himself on his hunts. But he kept telling her not to worry, because he was very experienced and promised not to take any chances. However, apart from Aphrodite and Persephone, there was one more god who was keeping an eye on the boy. His name was Aries, the god of war, who was Aphrodite's lover and therefore bore a great hatred for his rival. Ares knew that the young man's love for hunting rivaled his love for Aphrodite, and so plotted his revenge. Adonis roamed the woods in search of yet another prey when he stumbled upon a mighty boar. Ares stirred up the young man's bloodlust. He ended up forgetting the promise he made to the goddess of not risking himself needlessly. Adonis chose to fight the beast and managed to wound it. But Ares inflated the beast's heart with unbridled fury. The boar decided not to flee to preserve its life, but to furiously charge Adonis. He drove its powerful tusks into his abdomen. Adonis was mortally wounded. Aphrodite came running to his aid, but there was nothing more she could do. He died in her arms. She buried him, and upon his tomb grew beautiful red flowers that were named Adonis. As one goddess wept, another in the underworld was beaming and waiting for the arrival of the most beautiful man who ever lived. The powerless goddess of love watched the arrival of Hermes, who was there to lead Adonis's soul to Hades' realm. In the netherworld, Queen Persephone eagerly awaited the arrival of the most beautiful man in the world, for whom she cherished a great passion sparked by Eros's arrow. Adonis was welcomed in the underworld by specters, who treated him with great honors. The boy was surprised at such a reception. He had no idea of the love that the queen of the underworld had for him. Persephone's loyal specters lodged the boy in a special room in the royal palace. While Hades, the underworld lord, was asleep, his queen broke into her guest's chamber. The beautiful goddess cornered the young boy, but he tried to dodge her. He dreaded Hades' revenge, but the goddess told him not to worry. If he didn't tell the god, she wouldn't tell him either. With no way out, he gave in to the goddess's lust. The sneaky encounters continued day after day. Aphrodite longed for her lover and promptly decided to go down to the Hades realm and rescue her sweetheart. She found Adonis there serving the underworld gods and said she was there to bring her beloved Adonis back to the surface. Hades, however, was aggrieved to see the goddess of love invading his kingdom and making demands. Hades told her that he did not care for Aphrodite's will. He appreciated the services rendered by Adonis, and he would remain in the underworld forever. But Aphrodite threatened to extinguish all love from the face of the earth. Only bitterness and grudge would remain between the couples. Hades ousted Aphrodite from his kingdom. She left in tears, but her threats were not empty. Throughout the world, love between couples began to dwindle. The relationship between Zeus and the goddess Hera, usually strained, was becoming unbearable. Zeus decided that something had to be done. He called for a meeting with Hades, Persephone, and Aphrodite, saying that the whole situation couldn't go on. He suggested Hades take possession of Adonis, just like the agreement he had made with the goddess Demeter. For a third of the year, he would stay in the underworld. The next third he would spend on the surface with Aphrodite, and the young man would have a third to enjoy in any way he wished. Hades took issue with Zeus's intrusion into matters of his kingdom, but knowing that Adonis was Persephone's favorite servant, he said he would not accept such an offer. To Hades' surprise, however, Persephone replied that, if it was for the good of all, she would allow Adonis to resurface and return to her husband's kingdom only when winter was approaching. Baffled, Hades did not understand why Persephone would release Adonis without putting up a fight. Spring arrived and Adonis departed to meet his lover Aphrodite. But summer meant that the goddess had to leave him. Hades had not anticipated summer is also the time that Persephone comes out of the underworld to find her mother, the goddess Demeter. And during the summer, Adonis and Persephone loved each other without bothering about being caught by the underworld king. But the quarrel between Persephone and Aphrodite remained. They always sought to maximize the length of their relationship with Adonis. This is why in some years the winter seems longer or the heat of summer persists. The love story of Hades and Persephone is one of Greek mythology's most famous. You have certainly heard the story that the god kidnapped her, which gave rise to the seasons. But before he met Persephone, Hades had a lover named Minthe, a nymph who lived by the river Cocytus. However, when Hades fell madly in love with Persephone, Minthe was cast aside. Some say that when Persephone headed to the surface to spend the spring and summer with her mother, the nymph Minthe would not leave the ruler of the underworld alone. But when Persephone returned, Hades would run straight into her arms, leaving the greenish nymph abandoned. Minthe went on to brag that she was the most beautiful entity in the underworld, as even Hades could not resist her charms. These claims made Persephone furious. The queen of the underworld would not let such an insult to her honor go unpunished. Persephone turned the nymph into a plant known as mint. Mint was a plant used in funerals in ancient Greece. One of the reasons was that the aroma masked the odor of the deceased. Therefore, the plant personified by the nymph Minthe became forever bound to her lover's domains.